I'm very excited to have you all here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. And this is a teaching chat. So our professional development events happen every Wednesday at noon. And we don't have a set presentation this week. We just can talk about whatever anyone wants to talk about. And I have lots of thoughts and ideas and questions. So if people don't talk, I will. But I would much rather kind of hear about what do y'all want to talk about? What's going on? What's been good? What's been less good? How's it going? This is about how my Zoom classes go too. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
Hi,
So
Cheryl.
I have a question I would love to crowdsource. So I teach, I don't know if I'm going to use the right term, some sort of hybrid term, where I'm in person, but I have students zooming in. And I have 2 students that always zoom in for health-related reasons, and the rest are a hodgepodge of I slept in late, or I'm not feeling well today, or maybe I'd just rather attend over Zoom. And it fluctuates. Today I had the highest level of Zoom participants. I had about 9 in person and 9 in Zoom. So I have 18 total. So they were all there, which is great. But I'm curious about any thoughts for how you all are navigating that if you have people in person and over Zoom as the first part. And then the second part is walking that line between, I really would prefer my students to be in person unless they're not comfortable or able to or not feeling well. But I think they get more out of it in person if that's a good option for them. So I'd rather they be on Zoom than miss entirely, but I think I have students, oh, it's kind of rainy today, I think I'll Zoom in. So that makes it a challenge when you're coordinating and planning for classes. So I would just love to hear thoughts on this type of thing.
So I know I have some thoughts on these. I know Serena has some thoughts on these because I'd heard about some ratios in her class recently. How many of us are teaching in this kind of high flex environment where we have people? Okay, so Andy's hand is up. I'm teaching the environment like this. Melissa's teaching. I know Serena is. It's challenging. It is very challenging. Andy, how are you handling it?
Well, so this is one thing that I've been thinking about recently because it is very much like I have one student who always comes via Zoom, and a couple of students who always are in person, and then a handful of students that it depends, and I never know what it's going to be. And I've been thinking about this recently that I might tell them that I would appreciate that if they're planning on coming via Zoom, that they give me some notice or something. But it's tough because I agree with you that like I would rather them come via Zoom, even if it's like a last minute thing that they weren't expecting. I would rather them come via Zoom than not at all. But it does make it challenging when I'm planning because there are some activities that I'm like, okay, well, if I'm gonna pair the students in these kinds of groups. And if suddenly the configuration of the class is different than what I expected, that makes it more complicated. So I don't know that I have a lot of advice, but I am right there with you in this struggle.
So Serena, if you don't mind me picking on you for a second, I had heard that your methods class, the ratios are maybe going a little sideways for you. And I wondered if you wanted to kind of share that experience.
Yeah, I was actually just going to chime in and say I'm not sure that I have advice, but I can share what's been going on in my class. So I have 43 students in my research methods class. And initially I had sort of had split sections, so you could come either Tuesday or Thursday. And now I just let anyone come whenever because I'm getting like 4 students in person. So that's like, 10% of my class, which is kind of crazy. That's not really what I expected. I even surveyed them kind of halfway through the semester and was like, are you planning on attending in person in the next week or in the next month? And I got about 15 that were like, yeah, I'm planning on it. And they obviously haven't. So the thing that I find the most challenging, kind of like what you guys have said, is trying to navigate engaging the people that are physically there in the classroom versus people on Zoom. So sometimes it'll be like, I want one answer from, everyone who showed up here, and I want one answer from Zoom. And if you're on Zoom, you can come forward or you can put it in the chat. So sometimes I try to be clear about like, we're all going to participate. What I did yesterday is I actually started using the polls a lot more in Zoom. I was like, I love this. I wish everyone in the classroom had clickers so that they could participate too, but they were just kind of sharing their answers out loud. And then I would share the results of the Zoom poll on the screen so that we could all see that together. But yeah, integrating the different populations and trying to run like in-person discussions or in-person activities is probably the biggest challenge that I've had this semester. And I don't know that I have great solutions, honestly, for that.
I'll say I teach 2 classes in this high flex sort of environment. And one of the classes is a grad class, actually the principles of college teaching, which is kind of an interesting class in that we're teaching people how to be college instructors, basically. And one of the advice we give them is to be the student you want to teach in class, and they don't always take that advice. So what we do is we have 18 students in that class, and we started out with about a 9-9 ratio. So about half were coming in person, about half were Zooming in. And interestingly, in that class, there are some students who are not in Kansas. There are some students who are in other states. There are some students who are in other countries. And when they realized we were kind of offered this high flex thing, they said, okay, well, I'm going to take the course when otherwise I wouldn't. So some of our students are not going to be able to attend in person, even if they wanted to. What we found over the course of the semester is our ratios have kind of dwindled. So we had gone down to about 6 and 12. And then we went down to about 4 and 14. Then we went down to 3 and 15. We went down to 1 and 17. And then yesterday, and I think the jury rather was part of it, we had our first 0 in person and 18 on Zoom class. We kind of surveyed them and said, how many of you are going to keep zooming in? And they're like, yeah, we're all going to zoom in from this point. So one of the things that we're kind of wondering, and Tucker and I are thinking about, is do we just go to the classroom and zoom it from there? You know, we've got the equipment set up and all of those kind of things. Or do we just kind of do it from home or something like this? So we're still trying to figure that out. My other class is about half and half. It's a first year experience class. It's a CAT community class. About half come in person and about half are zooming in. My experience, like many of yours, is the students who are in class are carrying the conversation. So the students at home, I don't know how engaged they are. One of the things that I don't do is I do not require people to turn on their videos. So I for lots of reasons, inclusivity, respecting their privacy and their home lives and all of those kinds of things, I don't require them to turn on their videos. So I don't really know how engaged they are. I will say that I use the chat quite a bit. So I use a lot of features where I'll say, okay, everyone write a response in the chat. And in 30 seconds, we're all going to hit enter at the same time. And it appears that those are pretty successful at getting people to get those responses in there. Several of my students are, if I kind of point out a good point and ask if anyone wants to elaborate, are willing to elaborate. With or without their video on, they will often use their actual voice to do that. Some will put really long explanations in the chat that we can all do. But what we were doing even prior to our class moving all to Zoom is I was having the students in class sign into Zoom too. Because what was getting really hard for me is restating all of the stuff that was happening in class so the students at home would be able to benefit from their colleagues' comments. So that was something that I was starting to do. But I wonder if that was actually starting to push my students out of the class, kind of unintentionally. If I'm on Zoom anyway, why not just be home when I do it? So I've been struggling with engagement. I've been struggling with conversation. The lack of ability to really have, kind of small in-person stuff happen has really kind of hurt the activities that I can do in my class. I haven't stated my preference to have them in class because I know so many of my students have barriers to come into class. I didn't want to make them feel excluded. So I am just kind of sharing my experience, but like many of the others, I don't have tons of advice about how to navigate this situation. I find that I'm almost having to just be flexible on a day-to-day basis to try to find the things work as well as I can. Does anyone else have kind of experiences or advice to kind of figure this out? Because this is the biggest challenge I faced as a teacher this semester. You're muted, Melissa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happens to me sometimes.
Got my kids in the background if you can hear them. So I would echo all of the sentiments that you all are sharing. So I appreciate both just the support and camaraderie and the, okay, this is what's happening to all of us. This is not something that's necessarily going wrong. It's just kind of the situation. I have tried, one thing I'll add is I've tried the breakout rooms when I've done hybrid because I can do it super fast. today, since I had 9 and 9, I think it worked pretty well because then there were 3 people in a room and I just did the random assignment so that it was really fast. And I tend to just kind of talk to those students and send them those broadcast messages. I don't know how well it goes because I'm not there and it's a 2-minute, okay, you're gonna have 2 minutes to talk in your groups, but I'll occasionally check in with them or ask them to report back. And I'm kind of hoping that peer pressure of, well, if I don't show up and say anything, that I'm letting, my partner's gonna wonder what happened to me. I'm hoping that's enough, and give them the opportunity. And I appreciate what you said, Dawn, about, and now I'm blanking because of COVID brain.
I'm
Oh,
familiar with that.
with how to balance the attention that you give to the Zoom students versus in person, because it might push them towards Zoom if they feel like that's more engaged. So I tend to lean more towards engaging the in-person people, but I do have a couple people over Zoom that really can't attend in person. And so I don't want them, to feel that pressure either, or to feel like, they're not as equally a part of our class either. So, but I appreciate you all sharing those things. It's helpful to hear.
I'll say one of the things so the class that is now, nobody comes to in person anymore, is a class on teaching. And one of the things that I felt very open about doing in that class is sharing with them the challenges and difficulties we're facing. So kind of saying, this is the challenge we're facing, and this is what we're going to try today, and we're going to see how it goes. Give us feedback on this. And I think when the class allows for those kinds of conversations, without us kind of sacrificing our credibility or our legitimacy as being an instructor, I think bringing our students in on those challenges and difficulties is a good way to show us as authentic and human. I think coming in and saying I have no idea what to do is probably not what I would say, but I think saying this is the challenge we're facing and this is what we're going to try because this is something that's important to me, I think is a great way to create some connection with your students.
I would totally agree with that, and second that, kind of this pulling back the curtain and letting students see what it is that we're having to deal with, and inviting them to bring in comments. And so what are the things, especially for when you have students who are primarily on Zoom and students who are primarily in the class, what are you seeing that's working really well with that modality? And what are the things that you're seeing that need to be changed? Because I remind my students that I can't see this from your perspective. For you students who are on Zoom, I don't know when you're having trouble hearing me. I don't know when you're having trouble following what's going on in the class. It's a little bit easier with the students who are in person because I have a lot more cues that I can read off of them. But same for the students who are in person, in what ways is it difficult to interact with your peers who are on Zoom? And I think inviting them to be part of the solution gives them some agency in the classroom and is beneficial in terms of giving me ideas and just knowing kind of where they're coming from.
A point that I'll make here, because this was interesting. So at mid-semester, one of the things we're kind of advocating is you check in on your students, which is what you're kind of talking about, Andy. And sometimes your students give you conflicting feedback. So for instance, in our principles of college teaching class, we said, what do you like? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? Those kind of things. And we have students saying, I hate the breakout rooms, and other students saying, I love the breakout rooms. So I think as long as you kind of realize, you're going to take those under advisement, and you're going to make the best decision you can based on your educational goals, but you're probably not going to make everybody happy. I've had the students sometimes say, well, I told you to do this. Yes, I understood you told me to do that, but a lot of those students told me not to do that. So I have to make the best decision for everybody.
And I think it's good then to let them know when you've gotten conflicting feedback so that they're aware that it's so I know that some of you said that you love the breakout rooms. I know that some of you said that you hate the breakout rooms. So because I got both of those responses, we're going to continue doing breakout rooms, but we're not going to always do breakout rooms. And we're going to try to find a balance so that they recognize that you hear them, but that their voice is not the only voice in the classroom.
Absolutely. By the way, one of the advice that I would give you on breakout rooms, that I've had some success with this, is that I always give them a little bit less time than I think they're going to need for whatever activity I'm having them do. So there's a sense of urgency and that they're going to stay on task and doing it. And I always have a product. There's something that they're going to bring back to the group. Usually it's a small statement they're going to make in a chat, a number one recommendation, a most important point, or something like that. I haven't found really any success with free form discussions in breakout rooms. I think they have to be kind of quick and have to have a point to them for them to work. What I have had though, in this past week, we did breakout rooms about Black Lives Matter in my psychology prejudice class, and I had 2 people not come back from the breakout rooms. They just disappeared. So I don't have a real good idea about what happened with those 2 students. One I followed up with since I had an organic contact, and she was just like, yeah, I just lost my connection. But I don't know if sometimes with these sensitive topics or something, did that student just say, I'm not playing today, and decide to just reduce themselves from the discussion. But so breakout rooms can be fun. I'm sorry, I'm checking out the chat.
Yeah, I have thought on those that are doing breakout rooms for longer periods of time, not necessarily going to work for what Melissa was talking about, where it's just 2 minutes or something like that. But one of the things that I've seen done is using a shared Google Doc, so that all the students are contributing their notes to that same location. I've seen it used in Google Slides or just the doc or lots of different ways, but all of them open it up and are putting in their notes. So you, and if you have a really large class, possibly a TA, can see that conversation without jumping into the room, right? And so it's a way to see if they're at least talking, right? You can even at the top of the Google Doc says, if I don't see you typing, I'm jumping in, right? Be ready. And so you're not feeling like that, I don't know where to go of 10 different rooms. How much time do I spend in each, and how do I show that I'm engaged with those folks? So just a thought.
I think that the Google Doc also allows you to do breakout rooms that give them a little more time to, if you want them to have a longer discussion, what I'll do is do a Google Doc with like, step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. And then use the, what do you call it? The broadcast feature to help keep them on track. So like, if you haven't finished with step 1 now, like finish it up and move, you should be moving to step 2. And that way, like they have an opportunity to speak with each other for longer than, a minute or 2, and engage in creating something. And yeah, either using Google Docs or Google Slides where there's something, usually I'll create them so that each group has their own, but that I can monitor each one. And then we come back and they share what it is that what their conclusions are, or whatever the objective is of the activity.
So what else are people doing that are working either in a HyFlex or kind of an all online setting? What's working well for your students? What other challenges are we having in those modalities?
I have a challenge that's related to this, and that's just kind of like the long-termedness of this. Like thinking about that this is also going to be next semester, and also looks like it's going to be next fall, and like just the like not knowing when this is going to end, and feeling like I'm getting depleted, and that like I'm putting in all this energy, but I'm not getting back the normal, like I get that normal like teaching high when I go in and I'm in the classroom. And even for my HyFlex class, I'm not getting that this semester. Like I don't get that feedback that makes me feel good. And so I'm just kind of like more and more, I'm like, how am I going to keep this up? And we talked about this a little bit last week with resilience, but I don't know, man. I don't know how I'm going to keep it up.
It's probably not surprising that, you're saying that on the day that our modalities are due for the fall semester. And how the hell am I supposed to predict how I want to teach in August next year? So yeah, it's a very, very daunting situation. The depletion is real. And because time is an exhaustible resource and energy is an exhaustible resource, there's time taken away from other things that the university wants us to be doing for our jobs. And I worry about what this is going to mean for promotion and tenure for those of you on tenure tracks and research productivity and those kind of things. And I apologize for venting for 5 seconds, but we have not had any administrative oversight on how it is that we deal with those productivity dips related to this COVID-19 pandemic. And the point that I've tried to make very strenuously recently and gotten zero traction on is that the people who are going to be most hit are the ones who listened to us and leaned into their teaching in difficult times. So the ones that took care of our students like we asked them to are going to have their CVs get hit the hardest. And we have given really no protection to those individuals. And I'm using my voice in a lot of meetings right now to try to play that, but I'm not getting any traction on that. So I think that there is a very large degree of consequence, and our psychological consequence, kind of that very proximal concern about teaching is not as fun. I'll just say that teaching is not as fun right now. It's fun, but it's not as fun as it used to be. And I'm trying to find ways for myself every week to make it as fun as I can, because like you, I realize that I'm spending more time on it. It's taking more from me. I don't feel like I'm giving exactly the same quality product. I think I'm doing a good job, but I don't think I'm doing the job I normally do. And that's hard. And the only thing kind of keeping me going is realizing, we are going to get through this, but they keep changing the distance on how long it takes to get through this. So I offered absolutely nothing of value, but I vented. So maybe someone else can provide a better answer to Andy's concern and mine now, for how it is that we manage during this time, because I think many of us are struggling.
I think it's a huge problem that so many of us didn't realize the true impact and stress of blended learning. Right? We were told go blended, make it happen, bring them on campus, all of that. And it's really important. It's absolutely important, but it's managing Zoom and managing people in front of you is so hard. And I admire all of you for doing it. I think it's amazing, all of the work that you are doing and the focus on teaching that you're all giving. I mean, the people that are in this room right now, that's always been your focus, right? You've always been incredible teachers. That's, just coming here shows that. But I wonder how many folks have moved fully online just to remove themselves from the difficulty of the blended. And I know my sons are both at K-State. I know for sure one of them has just moved fully online because all but one of his classes were online. So he's like, why should I go to campus for one class? And the other one hasn't talked about it much, but I think he's mainly doing everything online. So if the students are choosing that path and it's more stressful for all of you, what's the right ratio? How do we really decide that it's best to do a blended course, or should we just allow folks to focus and be online if we have to continue this environment?
So I'll be honest, I both love hybrid learning and struggle with it. I think it is really cool to have people in the classroom and online and to allow students that flexibility, especially because I think we're just better to accommodate the things that they have going on in their personal life. And I really, really like that. I'm teaching my undergrad class all online next semester though, because it is so hard and so draining to do. And I feel like I needed a break from that next semester. And it was really hard to make that choice because I wanted to offer an in-person component for the couple of students who get something out of that. But again, it's just been such a struggle that it's like going to take a break from that next semester. And I'm still on the fence about what to do for the fall, even though that's due today.
And to be honest, with the modalities for the fall, I'm trying to pick the one that gives me the most flexibility so that when August comes, I haven't violated it, but I can do what I want. And I'm not sure what the magic answer is yet, but I have some time dedicated later today to try to figure that out. I think too, one of the things that's really hard is that the challenges each week appear to be different. So, I found that early in the semester, I was getting literally 4 and 5 letters a day for students going into quarantine and isolation. And now those have tapered off a little bit. But what's happening is now it's the mid-semester issues, right? So it's students not performing as well as they would like, or students having health problems at home, or those kind of things that they've got to attend to. And the weather's not helping. The students are not wanting to go outside. And it's amazing how something like that can be a factor. But the challenges just keep changing. So once you kind of figured out this is how I'm going to deal with this one, then the next one pops up. And I don't think that the degree of stress and anxiety is making the way that students communicate their concerns to us any easier. I don't think people have gotten more polite because of the pandemic, for instance. And I think that all of those challenges just become very, very hard for us to carry. And I saw a couple of videos turn on, so I'm pausing in case other people wanted to make comments.
I was just thinking like I'm teaching hybrid classes now and I'm doing it in the spring and I've already said I'm going to do it in the fall, but I think what I'm going to do in the spring is one day will be the students who want to be in person. I'm doing a flip class, and then the other day will be the students online, because what I've really noticed, it is very draining for me, but even more so the students who come to class feel like they have the burden of all of the discussion, all of the work, even though some of the students online actually do talk quite a bit. Most of them aren't really engaged. And so I feel really bad for my in-class students because they want the experience, but they didn't want to carry the whole load of the class on their shoulders either.
And I was having the opposite problem where the students in class wanted to carry the whole discussion. And we had it very awkward where it was 1 in person and 17 online. The one person in class was dominating. We're like, you need to let the others talk. And it was really kind of hard to do that because he was just like, well, I thought you were talking to me. I was like, well, I'm actually talking to you and the 17 people at home. It's just you can't see them. And that was hard. So what other ways are people managing? I mean, we talked about resilience last week. We're going to have some focus on self-care in the spring semester because, as a couple of you have noted, there is going to be a long time without a break in very trying circumstances. And one of our focuses for this whole year is caring, but caring for yourself and for your students is important. Is anyone doing anything right now that's really kind of worked to keep them geared up and excited to teach?
Honestly, I kind of feel a little bit like Serena was saying. I really like that in-person component. That's kind of what keeps me going, is being able to do that, because I feel like it's energy draining to do the fully online stuff if I'm just having a Zoom. It just requires a lot more energy. And I'm fine during it, but afterwards I think, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted, versus after an in-person class, it requires a lot of energy, but I feel like I have more energy from that. And so that's mine. Although I think the other thing that keeps me going is that, and I teach a small class and it's a CAT community, but I do one-on-one Zoom calls with my students a couple times in the semester. And so just being able to see each other without masks on and have a one-on-one conversation, and they, except for one student, they always turn their cameras on for that. And so that really helps to have that one-on-one connection with students for me.
Excellent. I love that.
One thing that I've done for this semester, and I highly recommend it, it's going really great, but I planned it from the beginning, was that I front loaded the class pretty heavily, because I was like, I don't know how we're going to be feeling in November. I expect that come November, we're all going to be pretty drained. And so I'm teaching a course in language pedagogy, and we're almost like the next 2 weeks, we have like kind of some new topics, but they're not anything like really in depth. We've seen at this point, all of like the main topics, all of the important theory. And now over the next couple of weeks, we're just going to be like putting it together in class. We're going to be talking about how we communicate our teaching. And my students are like, we are so thrilled that we're like now winding down, because a lot of their other classes are really ramping up at this point, and they're like, they feel like they're getting ready to be able to take a break in my course. And I feel that way too, because I'm like, at my wit's end, and then I look at the calendar and I'm like, oh, okay, like now we're just getting to the point where we're putting things together. And so I highly recommend, if you're planning classes for the spring, to front load your courses so that by the end of the semester, you're kind of winding down before you, when you're really feeling burned out.
I will say that I don't have, my classes don't have the opportunity necessarily to front load quite as much because, it's different kind of class. But what I do try to do is I try to do the hardest, least interesting stuff early in the semester and then end with the easier, more interesting stuff so that that kind of naturally kind of creates the ebb. So my general psychology class, when most people come into general psychology, they want to learn about disorders. But we do that in November. Early on, we're doing developmental theory, we're doing brain stuff, which a lot of students are scared of, research methods, those kind of things. And then the information starts to, it takes a turn after the second exam and gets more to the stuff that they were expecting. So it's kind of a natural way for them to kind of have the lower energy go with the higher engagement. Now, one of the things that I'll share, this is something that I do to kind of return some of that fulfillment as a teacher, because I have a hard time speaking into a void. And one of my classes is asynchronous. So I'm giving lectures to a laptop. And that's hard. That's something I've never done before, and I don't quite enjoy. But I'm trying to do my best to kind of anticipate their questions and bring the energy and the enthusiasm and all of that. One of the things that I'm doing in my classes is I have all of them do weekly reflections. So it's the things that they learned and the coolest thing that there was, the most surprising thing, those kinds of things. And while I'm speaking into the void, the things that they're doing in the weekly reflections, the week activities are letting me know that they're hearing me. And I think what I need to do right now is I need to know that I'm connecting with my students. And not every student is giving me wonderful stuff in their reflections, but a lot of them are. And in my graduate course, they're doing better than they were during the semester, normal semesters last year with their reflections, doing a wonderful job with the sophistication of the stuff that they're coming up with. One of the things that I do in my classes, at the end of the classes, I do this in almost all my classes, at the end, 6 words, what'd you learn today? And it just lets me know that, hey, we did something today. They took something away from this, and I want them to feel like it was worth coming to class. So they took something away too. But I find that those moments are really psychologically fulfilling for me because I feel like I reached them in some capacity. And it's easy, it's fast. You don't have to have points associated with them if you don't want to. So it doesn't have to be an extraordinary amount of work for you. But I did find that that's something fulfilling that I've really looked forward to this semester. So what else are we doing to take care of ourselves and find fulfillment?
So one thing that I've really been struggling with is I don't have that connection with my students in my asynchronous class anymore. I don't get to know anything about them. So one thing that I did this week, and I got this idea from one of my colleagues, is I told them that one of the things I love doing for self-care is cooking. So I encourage them to do their own self-care, but I also let them know, if you're willing to share with me like your favorite home cooked recipe, I'll give you 10 points extra credit because I want to be able to get to know my students somehow. And I think food is a really good way to get to know people. And I just made that announcement today. And so I'm pretty optimistic that it's going to have pretty good feedback, but I'm kind of struggling with ways to try and get to know my students, kind of where they're coming from.
I love that. That is amazing. Yeah, pass along any good recipes.
One of the things that I did with my students when we first went online in the spring, I switched all of my classes to asynchronous and had that same, like, how are we going to keep up? Like, I really value having community. And when we're not actually like interacting in real time, I was like, how am I going to continue to foster this idea of community? And so I started offering them a half point of participation extra credit every day, every class day. If they created a Flipgrid responding to something. So I called it pre-class banter, because we always would have those, like little pre-class talk about, like, students come in and you kind of chat with them. And I was really missing that. So, I would create a Flipgrid and I would tell them about what I was thinking about, things that I was struggling with, something that I did for fun recently, something that I saw on the internet that was funny. And then I'd be like, tell me about what you've seen. And they'd share like memes or tell me about what they were doing. And some students didn't participate, but a lot of students did. And it really kept up a lot of positive energy in that class. So that was something that I was like, ooh, if I do asynchronous again, I definitely want to incorporate that.
I love that. That is amazing. I do miss the pre-class banter. I find it's not the same. I go to Zoom meetings early to try to do that. And they either don't come early or they don't really want to banter. So I love that you're doing that.
So Tucker, I don't know how big your class is, but Melissa's idea of doing just a quick one-on-one meeting with each of them, sort of a get to know you, even just 10 minutes, could help you kind of get to know them a little better.
I have 106.
So Tucker, I have a suggestion for you there, because my husband teaches in engineering and he has a couple hundred every semester, and he does group meets. So before COVID, he'd have 3 or 4 in his office at the same time. They would get to know each other and he'd get to know them. And so he could then, instead of having 100 meetings, you can have like 25. So I don't know if that's an option for you to do a small group or divide them up, but meeting with more than one person at a time has worked for him. So it still ends up being a lot of time, but yeah, you can't do 100, 100 one-on-one.
So I'm gonna pick your brain on this too, because I have my CAT community, and I've had this forever. They have I call it the student hours mission. I call all my assignments missions because they sound more fun that way. So the student hour mission, what they've got to do is they've got to send me an appropriate email asking to set up a meeting, and I tell them how to do that, and then we meet. And this year it's Zoom, right? We're not doing it in my office, and they have 4 weeks to do it. The due date is tomorrow, and 4 of them just were like, nah, not going to do that. And there's points associated with it. I mean, it's an assignment that's always been part of the class. I've had, maybe 1 or 2 over the years not do it, but normally people do it. And this is the first year I've had like, a third of the class ish is deciding not to. And my other kind of comment is sometimes they're having these meetings and like they have roommates in bed behind them and things like that. And it's, so some Zoom etiquette I haven't really explored too much there too, but that's been interesting. But I'm all about opportunities in my classes. I set everything up as these are opportunities. You have to earn points. You can decide to do them or not, but you never lose points. It's just you didn't have them and you failed to earn them. So 4 students have not taken this opportunity despite me putting points associated with it and playing up its importance. How do I get them to do it?
No answers, right?
No answers. Like, not a rhetorical question.
So
I don't know if it's a rhetorical question.
I honestly am wondering for some if it's the extension of the pass no pass, right? That they're choosing that middle ground and choosing not to go for the A. I mean, you always have those students that that aren't the overachievers that so many of us are. But I think they really are looking at what the value of each of the assignments that they're being assigned and what do I spend my time on or not, and is this of value to me? And so I don't have an answer. It may be that you just are going to have to let them go.
And I will.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not
of
going to
course.
take. I've given them the opportunity for 4 weeks, but
Right.
it's just I would, if there was a way, kind of thinking about this continuing into next fall, if there's packaging on this or things that you've done to get your students to take part in these, I would love to make this somehow more inviting for my students, because and many of them did, and those conversations were amazing, but some of them didn't, and that made me sad.
I'm wondering if part of it is they're so tired of Zoom that they don't want to, not because of you or anything, but because they just don't want another Zoom obligation at their computer. I don't know if your style is to reach out to people directly when they don't do things. I tried to do a little bit of that at the beginning of the semester to let people know, hey, I noticed you didn't turn this in. How's everything going? I want to remind you that, even if you turn it in and don't earn all the points, it's still better than taking a 0 on it. If you'd like to at least, make an attempt in the future. If you have things that come up, please let me know ahead of time. I can work with you a lot better ahead of time rather than just kind of like missing it and ignoring it.
Sure.
And I'd say that was somewhat successful. So of course you get some students that are like, oh my gosh, yeah, I forgot about that. Or, oh, thanks for checking in. It has been really hard, but I'm going to stay up on everything else. And sometimes it's met with silence, but
Sure.
I don't know if that's your style. Maybe that's something you could try for those 4.
So what I do is, if in my CAT community class in particular, and for those of you who are familiar with K-State First, it's a first year experience program where the CAT community classes have some educational learning outcomes, but it's also kind of teaching them to college and letting them know that we're here for you and we want to support your success and those kind of things. So if a student is not doing the kinds of things, I would definitely reach out in that class. For these 4 students, it's the only thing they haven't done. So I am kind of wondering if it's kind of closer to what Laura is saying. So they're not checked out or those kind of things. And I'm not taking it personally, but it's just like, is 25 points really enough for me to kind of go through this? And, you know, in the past, it's been worth more points because everything was worth more points. One of the things that I did this semester is I reduced the points on almost everything and made fewer low stakes things. So I am kind of wondering if they're just like, yes, it's just not worth the investment for the point value that's associated with it. One of the things I have done, and for those of you who teach CAT communities, you know this, is we have learning assistants. And learning assistants are not TAs. So teaching assistants, you know, kind of take on some teaching roles, some grading roles. A learning assistant is more like a peer mentor. So I've had the learning assistant reach out, and that hasn't worked either. So I am just kind of thinking, they're thinking, hey, I'm good. I don't need to talk. I don't want to, because they might say, you know, we're supposed to come up with questions to talk about. I don't have any questions, you know, so why waste my time, your time, if I really don't have anything to talk about? But it makes me sad.
I think this comes in with priorities, though, and I think that teaching our students priorities is a really important thing that we can teach them as college students. And that's one thing I try to really encourage my students, that they think strategically about the class and what their goals are for the class, what their priorities are. And I've talked to students who have like been really wishy-washy about like not turning stuff in, and you know, like turning in stuff that like I know that they can do a lot better. And I've sat down with them and said, like, what are your goals in this class? What do you want to get out of it? And I've had students say, like, you know, I'm sorry, but I'm just really not interested in, like, I want to get like a C in this class so that I can move on. But like, I have this, like, this is my goal. This is what I want to focus my energy on. And I'm like, great. That's awesome. Like, I can support you in that. Like, if you want to C in this class and you're doing C work, we're golden. Like, but just that to make sure that whatever their goals are and what their priorities are match up with what they're doing for my class. Because if they're doing C work and then wanting an A, we have a problem. Or, you know, if what they want to get out of the class is not what they're putting in, then that's problematic. So I think that kind of approaching them and talking about, you know, what are their priorities, and is this something that they want to prioritize or not? And if it's not, then say like, all right, well, great.
Yeah. And I think it's really empowering to think like that. So it's, yeah, I think that's great advice, Andy.
I think a couple other things to consider. One is just information coming at you overload with the number of, I feel like there's more emails now and there's more notifications on Canvas, and there's just more written communication. It's just, if you have a list 20 items long and one of them is that one-on-one, it's maybe a matter of priority, but maybe just a matter of being overwhelmed. Or for some students, I've found that usually the ones that I'm having trouble, or it takes longer for one-on-ones, is there is something in their personal life, often with mental health, and they just have to get to a point where they're comfortable sharing that with me. I talk to my students a lot about mental health, including my own. So I think they're more likely to open up to me about that because I share my own struggles. But I also wonder for those one-on-ones if students feel nervous about a one-on-one, because they don't know what it is that you're going to talk about, or they think it's not a class setting. And if it's over Zoom, they might think, what if my teacher thinks this about me or wonders this about me? So I guess that kind of comes down to what you know about those 4 students as well already to fill in the pieces. But other than that, I think there's a lot of possibilities. I don't know how helpful that is.
It is helpful. It's interesting that one of the 4 students I'm completely surprised by, because she's probably the most engaged in class. You know, she has very sophisticated comments. She does a great job on all of the work. And I wonder if she just like, I'm good, you know, kind of thing. But I appreciate your ideas. And I won't take more time on the issue unless other people want to, but I really appreciate it, because it's one of those things where like, hey, I want to share. I want to meet you. I want to take the mask off and those kind of things too. And 4 students didn't take the opportunity, but you know, that is what it is.
I'm wondering, and this is, obviously totally your choice and how it works in your class, if you give them an option between two different modalities. So the one that you're offering them is face-to-face, but maybe if they send you an email or a communication through Canvas, and maybe that suits their sort of communication preference a little bit better. And potentially if they feel intimidated or weird or whatever about having a one-on-one, that might overcome those barriers a little bit.
So I will say that in the context of my class, one of the things they do is they scaffold their missions. One of their earlier missions is to get information via email. So this is kind of the extension of that. So what we're doing is we're kind of building their skills and letting them know their different resources. So we already had, you can email the TA, the learning assistant, or me, because they have a connections class with me and the learning assistant. They also have a large class with me and a TA. So you can email one of the three of us about either of those two classes to get information. And then we kicked it up to the student hours appointment. So there's different modalities across the missions that they engage in. So what other questions do people kind of have, or other challenges or other successes they want? I realize the nature of these kinds of conversations is to talk about the things that are, maybe problematic or challenging, but what challenge do we have, or what is going well? And Trina noted the anxiety issues might be playing up with that, reinforcing Serena's point. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was gonna say, I had one issue that I told my students I would actually bring to this conversation today. In the spring, I didn't do group projects. I got rid of the group project when we went online, because I thought, what a mess. That's gonna be hard to teach them how to work together online. But I kept reading stuff all summer, like you need to have group projects and teach them how to work virtually, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, great, I'll do that. But I'll give them the tools and resources to do that. And now I'm having a lot of students in many groups where they can't communicate with other people in their groups because my class has hybrid and asynchronous students all at the same time. And I've emailed people, I've put groups in Canvas for them, and I'm not sure what to do for them because this is usually a problem, but it's like 1 or 2 students every semester. Now it's like multiple groups are having these problems. And I feel for the students who feel like they're gonna have to end up doing the group project and then their partners are gonna get credit when they shouldn't, perhaps.
So we actually talked about this exact issue in our Principles of College Teaching class yesterday. So I'll lead off with the thing we talked about. The number one advice we kind of came up with is if you're going to have students do that, give them class time to connect. Because as people have all of these other things that they're navigating, family responsibilities, kids at home, elder care, healthcare issues, all of that. If they already have time for, and I'm assuming you have a synchronous class meeting. If not, then this isn't going to work for you. But if you have a synchronous class meeting, you say, I'm going to give you these 75 minutes on Thursday where you can go in and connect. And maybe they even come to class and you assign them to breakout rooms to do it. And then you're there to handle any questions they might have. It's a really good way to facilitate the group work. Because and I mentioned this yesterday too, is I hated group work as a student because I was the one that didn't trust the other people to do their end of the thing. So I did all the stuff and it wasn't their fault. I would just take it. And if people couldn't make meetings, I'd be like, all right, I'm sick of scheduling. I'll just do it and I'll send you what I've got. So I think really just having that class time and that opportunity and even providing the vehicle by which they connect is helpful. And I also kind of smile because my daughter is 11 in 6th grade and she's also struggling with this because they have these things where they're supposed to connect over Zoom in their off time to work on group projects too. So this starts very, very early. But I think having the opportunity that you take out the scheduling issue and you take out the need to figure out how they're going to do it, then they can focus on actually doing the work.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, I do have asynchronous students, which is most of the problem because they never come to class then. And then I also am doing the flipped where I have some on one day and some on another, and they're in groups together. I did do one thing I learned at a conference a few years ago was ask them before I make the groups, how do you like to do your work? Do you do it like last minute or do you do it up front, kind of planning throughout the semester? So that's helped a little bit on some of these issues over the years as well.
That is interesting. I've never thought of doing that. I wonder, that must be a harrowing experience.
So can you give a little bit more information? You put like people with like people, or do you mix them in?
No, the way I've done it physically in class is they literally just go physically into 2 groups. Do you like to do everything last minute, or do you like to do things, with lots of planning? And then I have them within those groups find their own groups. This semester I did a survey, and then from the survey I put them in groups. Probably what's happening here is some people didn't fill out the survey. So now I have to guess what I think. Like, I don't know anything about my students. So it's just like stick some people in random piles. But usually when we're in class, it works a lot better because most people are in class every day. So, and that way then also when they have these problems later, I'm like, well, which group were you in? Like if you're in the last minute group, maybe like that's why, because you're all going to do this last minute. So.
One of the other things that I often recommend for group work is, while I will have students do group projects, I often have the final thing they produce be individually created. So they'll work with each other on the project, on the idea of that, but the report or the summary is something they do individual, so that I'm not relying on Tucker or Ashley, for instance, for my grade. And you don't have the person who really likes to write being the person who does that, or the type A individual like me who just takes it on. So I think there are ways to kind of have individual products come from group work that are also stress reducing for some students, but also I think is, it sounds fairer to me as an educator to grade me on what you did and not grade you on what someone else did. So I've always been a little bit ambivalent about the way that sometimes group projects work, but what have other people done for their group projects? And I see that Melissa's talking about some things with Microsoft Teams. What have y'all done? And thank you so much for bringing this question to our chat today.
Yeah, this is a good one. I was going to mention what Laura had said in the chat about having students evaluate. I have students evaluate their peers and do a self-evaluation. That gives me a lot of data points to get an idea of like, who are the students like Dawn who just kind of take and then feel like, oh, my group mates didn't do anything. And then the group mates are like I tried to do something, but like I didn't really get an opportunity. It gives me a better idea of kind of what the group dynamic has been. And it gives students an opportunity to reflect on, were they a good group member or not? And, for students who aren't that good of a group member, that comes out. It also motivates students if they know that part of the grade is going to be their peers evaluating what they did, and they know that up front. That tends to motivate them a little bit more because they know they're going to get outed if they don't do the work.
So what I've done for this semester, and it's not necessarily a group project so much as it's a chance to bounce ideas off of one another and to socialize a little bit, is they have to write a final paper to demonstrate their understanding of research methods concepts. And so they've picked a topic, and I've let them sort of pick topics from different areas of psychology, and I've put them together into groups based on the area that they picked. And so then they have 3 discussion boards throughout the semester. And the first one, sort of their idea. The second one is a literature review. And the third one is like what they propose to actually do. And so they have to create a post, and it helps them work on their final paper in pieces, which is more bite-sized for them. But then they're also reading other people's ideas and giving them feedback. And because they're in groups that are similar topics, they can kind of share ideas with each other. And so they're working together and they're communicating with each other when they might not otherwise get the chance to this semester, but their grades really aren't too dependent on what the other people are doing. So yes, they get a grade for responding to other people. But if somebody decides to just like not participate in the discussion board, no one else is going to get penalized because of that.
So Clarissa, it's probably too late for this suggestion, but I've found that students who work together, there's some that are going to be motivated to work together and have that, I don't want to let my classmate down. But for those that are not motivated by that, the I don't want to let my friend down, it tends to be a more powerful motivator. So I think that's where a lot of the community building comes in. And what I've found to be really effective with my class, though I do have a small class, so I don't know how this would work with a larger one, is that I have an assignment at the beginning of the semester, and I've actually done it twice now, this same semester, where they interview a classmate and then they report on that. And so I think they develop that one-on-one relationship, that person becomes a real person to them, and maybe even a friend, because there is an in-person component to my class. But then they think, well, instead of letting this classmate down that I've never met, they're thinking, oh, this is an actual person and I know something about their family or their goals or their activities, or we connected on this level because we shared something in common. And I think that accountability piece to a person they know is a lot higher than just a name on a screen. if that's what they're experiencing. So I don't know if it's too late to incorporate something like that, maybe something for the future, but I think that can make a difference for students if they have a personal relationship with one another.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for offering that question, Clarissa. Any additional questions? We're almost done. Any additional questions? All right, so what we're going to do, we're all going to drop 6 words or less. What's our biggest takeaway from this chat? So to provide my fulfillment for the day. So what did we pick up from today? I don't know if people are still typing, but it looks like Tucker may have had the final word by saying the semester is hitting us all. Given that the semester is hitting us all, I'm really excited that we still took some time to share together today the teaching challenges and successes and ideas that we've had. As always, our professional development series is going to continue on Wednesdays at noon. And next week, we have a session on introducing Portfolium, a newly added portfolio system in Canvas at no cost to the program. So anytime we can have added functionality without increasing the cost for any of us, I think it's going to be fun. So I'll be really excited to talk about that next week. Thank you so much for joining us today.